So welcome to this session. We have some really great presenters. We're anticipating one more who hopefully will find her way here. I'm Beverly Scow. I'm the executive director at Wise Women Gathering Place, and I'll be your moderator and agency contributor. I'll be wearing two hats a bit today. And as Renita spoke this morning, she spoke about Margaret Mead's quote, right? No doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And so we've got some change makers here in the room, and we consider you all a part of that equation. So this is how we can connect our web of support to people in our community that are needing the resources. So we want you to know these people well. They have great agencies and great resources, and we hope you all will, and to learn from you all, right, to build that web of support. So I guess to start, we have on the end, we have Shelby Mitchell. Shelby's worked in the field of victim advocacy for over 15 years and has experience working with victim survivors from a variety of crimes, including sex trafficking, stalking, sexual assault, sexual violence, domestic violence. She is the prevention specialist at Family Services and provides trainings to multiple professions. She's been around forever and is
it feels like it.
a valuable resource and a great comforting friend when you call in need. So thank you, Shelby, for being here. And Jen is prevention coordinator from Golden House, and she provides casework, safety, and support to victims of domestic abuse while leading education and prevention in concert with efforts to end domestic violence in our community. Golden House has been a long-standing valuable resource in our community, and they just built their new shelter. So we have something.
We're moving in.
Something to celebrate, as Rebecca encouraged us to do this at lunch. We also have Robin Scott is here from We All Rise African American Resource Center, our wonderful recent community provider, more than recent now. You've been here for how long? Since
2017?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Time flies. It feels like that was a blink ago, but, and Robin, came to us from Chicago, Illinois as an activist, public intellectual, and writer who advocates for the oppressed. Currently, she's executive director of We All Rise, and she strives to help Black youth and their families be positive participants of healthy relationships and be intentional about their investments in Black history and culture. And she's writing a book right now, so that's really exciting. And so, yeah, we've got some great people with great resources. So to start, our first question to us all is, how do victim survivors access your services and what is available to them? Who's showing up needing services at your agency? You want to just start on the end and work our way?
Sure. So victims can really access us through any point. So medical providers, which many of you may be, other agencies can refer to us. We have some people that they're just walking down the street. They know that they need help and resources, so they'll walk in. And then some of our other ways would be schools with the teen dating violence, colleges, and excuse me, just other family services programs. We have over 30 different programs with family services. And I would say, many of those programs deal with violence on multiple different levels. So they're, hearing about and seeing violence happening in the home or have concerns about that. So they can make referrals to us or to Golden House from there.
So clients are able to access in very similar ways as what Shelby just talked about, where they can either walk in, they can call directly. We do have our Be Safe program as well, the 212 Safe. So you could have an opportunity to sit in a workshop a little bit later to hear about that as well. We have a text line. We have individuals that will contact us through email, maybe a referral through a case manager, other forms of mobile advocacy. So like when I'm out doing prevention work, I can offer levels of mobile advocacy to individuals as well. So sometimes I will end up connecting with people at that point. As far as our services, we do have an emergency shelter, and that is only about 25% of what we do. 75% of what we do is through our outreach facility. So we'll do anything from, we've got our 24-hour crisis line. So you can call at any point in time. There's a trained advocate on the other end. We provide safety training, safety planning, risk assessments, DV education, adult and family therapy, support groups. We have arrest response. So anytime there is a DV situation that there is police involvement, we do get a report on that. So that way, if let's say the victim consents to the release of their information, then we reach out to them, let them know of local resources, and also when the perpetrator is released from jail. That is an essential part of safety planning for individuals that have been in those circumstances. We also will assist people typically in those circumstances. There's a no contact order that's put in place. A lot of our victims there may be circumstances that it might be a one-time thing. We take our clients at face value when they come in. And when that no contact order is put in, they're not able to have that the perpetrator is not allowed in the home, not allowed to be there. A lot of times there's situations that arise, whether that might be the major financial provider in the family or if there's childcare concerns. We'll discuss that when people come in to have the assistance for a no contact order being lifted. We'll talk about all those dynamics of abuse. So they're a little more aware of what takes place. And we can't guarantee it has to still go through a commissioner, but we talk about, what that looks like and what resources are available. So that way, if it is a circumstance that they're in that cycle of abuse, they know where they can reach out and get some help. We also assist in restraining or harassment orders. We do emotional support in court. We have a legal advocate in the DA's office. Otherwise, we do a lot of referrals to Legal Action of Wisconsin to put people in touch with the much needed legal help that they need in some of those circumstances. In addition to our emergency shelter, we're like a no wrong door policy for applying for the coordinated entry housing program. So you do not have to be experiencing domestic violence. There's a lot of community partners that do involved with that same programming. So we want to make sure that we're an open door for them as well if we are an easy access point. We do have our own transitional living program as well. We help out with Safe at Home program, which is a program that you can omit the person's new address, kind of keep that person a little safer. It's not going to be in court documents. It's not going to be published. So it's one less way for that abusive person to locate once they've found a safer place to be. We do referrals to other community partners. We provide a lot of outreach things. So it might be anything from people coming to do laundry at our facility, material assistance, hygiene items, cleaning supplies, food, clothing, cameras, door alarms. A lot of those things may be a safe phone for them. A lot of times you'll have individuals that they're being highly monitored in their circumstances. So there may be a friend or family member that can keep a phone for them as kind of a little backup plan when they are able to get out of that unsafe situation. Rental or bill assistance, vehicle repair assistance, gas cards, bus passes, a lot of those general things that will try to help reduce the barriers that people face when leaving. We also work on prevention presentations. So I will go into schools, businesses, healthcare facilities, and other community partners and discuss healthy versus unhealthy relationships, recognizing red flags, safeguarding DV victims, and also what resources are available in the area. Sorry, that was a lot.
It's like Golden House named everything. We All Rise, how do you access services? So we're open 9 to 5 all weekdays, except on Thursdays, which is a commitment that we have to opening a little bit later start for our staff. And so they come in at 11 o'clock. From 11 to 1, they're in DVSA training. And from 1 to 5, they have by appointment only with clients. And then 5 to 8 allows untraditional hours for a service provider to be open for our direct services. And so you can get an intake at our agency from 5 to 8 p.m. every Thursday night, making it more accessible for those clients that could not come in and receive services during the traditional hours. But other than that, 9 to 4 for any new clients, we usually need about an hour to get paperwork done, make referrals, or have emergency services. So new clients will come during that time. Existing clients can come during all those hours. Additionally, we provide the 24-hour crisis line that you talked about and a host of emergency services as well. So those cameras, safe housing, referrals to shelters like Golden House. We also refer to other shelters in different areas as well. Try to get the clients safe in any way that we can. We provide emergency hotel stays for clients as well. So We All Rise is a dual agency, so we serve both domestic violence and victims of sexual assault and sex trafficking in our agency. We currently serve over 2,300 clients nearly in this area, and that is not our youth numbers added in. And so we have transitional living as well. We operate a 49-bed transitional living facility for men that some are survivors in shelter as well. Some are in need of LGBTQIA safe housing. Some are veterans. Some have acute mental health issues that they're working on in shelter and in programming. And so we have that available. We have free access to free mental health. And so there's no billing associated with our mental health services. We offer a host of individualized and group therapies. And so tonight there'll be 3 different groups going on. So sexual assault group, domestic violence women's group that we just been able to contract with someone from the outside as a trained facilitator for that support group. But we offer a host of clinical mental health groups as well. And so we have grief and family counseling, therapy for individuals on site. And so we have one licensed practical counselor, a clinical social worker, and a psychologist on our staff. And so we're able to offer those clinical interventions as well. So AODA services for our clientele as well. We are culturally specific agency. We serve clients across cultures. I did pull some infographics to give you all some statistics for our work. And so of those disclosed domestic violence victimization from October 21 through September 2022, 7% identified as part of the LGBTQIA community. These are infographics that we released during DV Awareness Month. 1,338 clients our agency had requested from October through September. 1,338 unmet requests for shelter from domestic violence survivors in our community. Shelter is a big deal. We have, the rising number of homelessness that folks are experiencing, and you couple that with domestic violence and sexual assault as the reason that folks are presenting and needing safe housing. It, becomes a problem for our entire community. Of those who disclosed the domestic violence victimization in October, November, and December of 22, 54% identified as female, and 46% of them identified as male at our agency. 80% of the 423 folks who disclosed were Black, 5% are multiple race, 6% are white, 5% are Native American, and the remaining 4% identified as other races. In our shelter program, as of this year, April 26, we had served 40 guests in-house. 7 of those were military veterans, 7 had serious mental health conditions, 18 folks have both a mental health condition and substance use disorder, 11 have serious substance use disorders. And those are just some of the studies that you can see on our site. We also have the 24-hour crisis line. Maybe I already mentioned that before. That is staffed by our mental health as well as trained advocates. So around the clock, we answer calls from emergency situations and community all the time. We typically, if we are responding to something that happens and we have to go on site, we'll respond with 2 staff members in any given situation. only in emergency situations where authorities are already on site will there be one person that handles the situation, and typically that's one of our supervisors at the agency, or myself, that will go out to those situations. We have both prevention and intervention youth programming, and so we have 2 full-time youth staff that work. Typically during the summer, we have kids on site 9 to 5 every weekday and every other Saturday. Right now we have kids on site 3 days a week and Saturdays at our agency. I'm trying to think about what you didn't say.
And I was like, I didn't even do the second part. It's all good. No,
Um,
you guys do a lot there.
Yes, so yeah, we have a lot of different services.
The college programming through TC.
Absolutely. We have our culturally specific GED programming that also happens on site, where we're able to support 24 people at a time in obtaining their GED. So the youngest folks that participate in that program, they would have had to be 18 years old and have their graduating class have already graduated. At that point, you can enroll in our programming, but there's no age limit. And that happens right on site, and we're still getting the information out there. We've already had some people that have started that have already graduated, and our first day of classes were June of 2023. And so some folks were really just on that cusp where they, didn't go back or didn't obtain their high school diploma and hadn't seen an opportunity to get back in traditional GED classes. One of the reasons that we started having this service on site for survivors is because we recognize that sometimes traditional classroom and school is not the best for all clients. And so we created a culturally specific program that is at a resource center where they have already built trust and built rapport. And so we're hoping that over our 2-year cohort with NWTC there, we're going to see great successes. It takes some time to get the word out and to be able to be at capacity, but we're hopeful for that. I don't know what else we forgot. I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wise Women Gathering Place is also a culturally specific community agency focused on the Native American community. The majority of our board, our leadership, our staff, and the people who come to Wise Women Gathering Place are Native American. There's a lot of urban people from tribes all across Wisconsin and outside of Wisconsin that are in the Green Bay area, as well as Oneida community members as well come to us for support. And we have people from all demographics who come to us for support. We came in and have been focused on prevention and healing from domestic violence. We have advocacy support as well for people who come and are new in their experiences. But a lot of our resources are focused around prevention and healing. We have sexual assault healing groups. We have a women's empowerment group that meets weekly. It's a drop-in. You can just come in anytime. The sexual assault groups are closed when we have enough people. Find a time that works for them to do their journey together. We have embraced White Bison. They're another agency. They're mending broken hearts, healing from intergenerational trauma and unresolved grief. And it's a 4-day kind of time together doing individual paired work or whole group work to look at the impact of historical trauma, generational trauma. And it helps people to do some forgiveness work so that they can focus on being more intentional about what they want to pass on to the next generation. So we do that. It's a focus on the Native American experience, but we've had people from all backgrounds go through it and find great value for their personal life, and also to understand the program if they're a service provider, to be able to refer people to the program. So everyone's welcome to participate in that. And there's an optional traditional sweat at some point in that process as well. We have youth programs in the summer. They're kind of more like week-long kind of intensives where we do a youth version of the Many Broken Hearts. We also do a Purpose of Life workshop, which is another White Bison program. We do Money on My Mind to kind of give some financial literacy skills for, we have it for youth and we have, for adults too. We're, all trying to figure out the finance part of things, Rent Smart. And then during the school year, we have, after school programs, middle school, after school program and, Wise Leaders, for high school and other young adults. And, our NASH, which is more of like a support group format. The other two are about life skills and bringing voice and awareness about the dynamics of domestic violence and sexual assault and healthy relationships, right? What does that look like? So we have a healthy relationship program, Discovery Dating. That's a really great tool. We're proud of that. It's homegrown from Alice's kitchen table and is in 2 peer-reviewed journals, which is about healthy relationships and healthy decision-making. So I think that's. So our next question is, do you believe some domestic violence victims have different barriers to obtaining help than others?
You want to take this one first?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Absolutely. Domestic violence victims face numerous barriers that of obtaining help that are very different than other people that would be seeking out resources. So they may have safety concerns. Their calls may be monitored. They may be tracking levels of email communication, text messages, even tracking devices within the phone or on the vehicle. So sometimes it's very unsafe for them to leave out. And I mean, even though there's benefits to us being, once we're in our brand new big location, we've been established there for a long time, so people know where we are. Okay, so there is benefits to that. Like if they happen to be out on their own and can manage to make it there, so be it. We will make sure that they stay safe from there. But it's hard sometimes to get there, and people are well aware of what that location is. So if that were to ping on someone's phone, it could be very detrimental to someone. You have fear of retaliation. So like once you get that ball rolling and they're aware that you sought out help, oftentimes people are in this cycle of abuse. We talk about these barriers, especially because oftentimes people will make that decision to go back because dealing with those barriers are very, very difficult. So if they've left and come back every time they leave, that ends up, that's the highest point of when they have to fear that level of retaliation. And it may gradually get worse every time they attempt to leave. Average statistic of attempts to leave is 7 to 10 times before a person does leave that abusive situation. So imagine how detrimental that could be each time. They may face major financial barriers, may not have their own transportation, lack of alternative housing. Typically, social isolation goes along with this. So oftentimes there's not friends or family nearby that you're able to leave for a safe place, or you fear that if you go stay there, that it's going to bring unsafe concerns for them as well. Mental health consequences of the cycle of abuse, or you have fear of losing children, religious, cultural, or socially learned beliefs. And I feel that is a way big impact for people, especially when we talk about like the demographics of people that we serve. That I didn't necessarily share some of the stats with you, but approximately 52% of our clients that have sought services identify as Caucasian. When you look at overall in Brown County, the 2022 census, 86.9% of Brown County is Caucasian. Okay. Well, then you step to the level of that individuals that sought out services that identify as Native American or African American through our facility has consistently in the past 5 years ranged from 14 to 16%. Now, the Hispanic community in the area has now increased in the last 2 years. So they're about in that same 14 to 16% range. But if you look at Brown County, they are actually a little higher percentage of people that reside in Brown County than either African American or Native residents. So when you talk about social, culturally learned beliefs, those types of things, we're fingers crossed on our end that they're going to culturally specific programming that's in the area. Okay, but also there were initiatives we took that we made sure that we were using certain media platforms to extend that reach to, so we were on like a Hispanic radio station, and we noticed an increase of the amount of Spanish speaking clients that we had coming for services, which is amazing. I have a feeling that a lot of times people are very fearful to reach out, not knowing what resources can actually help them. There's language barriers and even those social barriers. When you look at somebody who may come to that circumstance, they've already been through something extremely traumatic. And then to not necessarily be able to identify with the person that's helping them, that is exactly the reason why we need places like We All Rise, Wise Women. It's fantastic the work that they do, hoping that they reach out to culturally specific programs if they're not already reaching out for some level of help like that. It's important that they get that help. Oftentimes you'll see in situations that there's drug or alcohol abuse taking place. 80% of cases involved with DV have drug or alcohol abuse taking place, and that could be either the perpetrator or the abuser. When you look at the levels of mental health concerns that take place when you're in that cycle of abuse, oftentimes there's different coping mechanisms that typically can be negative as what you're utilizing to try to deal with that circumstance, which can create addiction. That's another barrier for trying to find help. They may have difficulty finding housing if there's a DV situation that they've had an eviction based off of numerous arguments that have taken place within their home. They may have been booted out. Once you have that eviction on your record, very, very hard to find housing. Or they may either lack work history or have a poor work history from the effects of DV, late for work all the time, missing work, constant calls or texts, or even poor work performance. And those are just a few of the things that people face when going through those types of circumstances. So it definitely creates barriers on getting help.
I think you named quite a bit of the barriers that folks face. I think I want to dig a little bit deeper into like social media.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
As a huge issue with, the safety of domestic violence survivors. Many folks that, a lot of folks use social media as an avenue of healing, as a way to really connect with others. And there are so many different platforms that still are tracking or make your location visible. And so that can become an issue, as well as, the publicness of, having the conversation about what you're going through and the opinions. I think COVID-19 is one that really has exacerbated a lot of the mental health issues that folks that are survivors face. Social isolation is really huge. Folks that are in DV situations are more than likely have isolated themselves over time and has disconnected from their normal networks of support. And so they experience a lot of issues trying to seek services. And then once they have sought services, being away from the place where they felt most unsafe, that can be difficult. Children become a barrier. So legally leaving with children, or the belief around legally leaving with children. So some folks are not always informed about what their rights are. And so they stay in unsafe situations a lot longer than what they have to. Racism and conflicting cultural beliefs. There are many clients that have sought our services, and I think you named a lot of that with why it's important to have culturally specific and mainstream organizations working really closely and in tandem with one another. Oftentimes folks feel most comfortable seeking, direct mental health services at our agency and with our support. Feel safer in shelters, but then also we have a number of survivors that present that have been traumatized at a shelter in some capacity, or have been re-victimized at shelter and they don't feel comfortable. We oftentimes have issues with folks that identify as LGBTQIA that have issue with finding safe shelter and comfortable housing after instances of DV and sexual assault. I think one of the huge barriers is pamphlet responses, right? And I call it the pamphlet response. It's us going down a list and just looking for what our traditional referral systems are, and then checking boxes from there. Oftentimes that leaves a lot of disenfranchised and marginalized folks at a disadvantage in those circumstances and situations. And so I think increased education around different races and ethnicities and what, their depression and anxieties look like. language barriers, become a huge issue. They exist in our work. As a culturally specific agency, there are communities that without, the right interpretation services, we're not able to serve as effectively as we're able to serve others. But I think that all of us, we have boxes that we must check in order to give services or be able to provide services. And so really always keeping that at the forefront and trying to undo some of that or work through that in the best way we can while still meeting the needs and demands of funders is really also a disadvantage for survivors, right? So the need to have them repeat themselves. And when they do have referrals, and we give strong referrals, most often we have not, within our movement of domestic violence and sexual assault work, we have not streamlined the processes appropriately across the agencies. And so survivors are made to tell those stories multiple times, leading to further re-traumatizing them. And I think that that's really important, that programs and, from hospitals, all of like in direct service agencies, shelters, we're all going to have our own host of paperwork that we need to get through. But I think that there are ways that we can be coming together to do that better, so that we don't have the survivors being asked those same questions. Sometimes it's documentation that's needed during the process to help a survivor be safe. You talked earlier about the Safer at Home, and we don't have like a fully operational program with Safer at Home, but we've been able to like learn from places like Golden House, the processes that they go through. And then we have folks that are on site that can notarize the paperwork that's necessary to get victim information off the internet, off of, CCAP. I think one of the other things that is important to recognize is the likelihood of Black and Brown survivors being charged with the crime after calling authorities or for help is one of the highest amongst those groups. And so oftentimes we will see survivors with lengthy disorderly conduct, domestic violence because of calls. And so that likelihood that they can be charged with that crime here is really high. I think it's also disadvantages that we should pay attention to are all the other things that exist within our state. I know that locally Green Bay was named like the best place to live in America, but I question whether or not who that's for and whether or not that includes all demographics of people and how that is represented. I also know that Wisconsin is the worst place in the United States for Black people to live. And so I imagine that Black people were not included and normed in that study. We have the highest number of incarcerated folks. And when we talk about restorative justice, highest number of incarcerated Black folks in jail here in Wisconsin. And so when we talk about restorative ways of healing, and we talk about, culturally specific, culturally responsive services, because of the historical erasure and the historical issues that have happened within the Black community, most often folks that are dealing with abuse and trauma often still would like to see those that have harmed receive some sort of supportive services. And because of the way that things are set up, a lot of traditional services are not allowed to or able to or have not seen themselves as part of that circle of healing. And I think that that's really important and a disadvantage for so many of our survivors. DVIP work is really a part of the healing. Oftentimes, communities like ours are very close, and they have the cultural nuances that they have to work through when dealing with situations like that. And so being able to get those that harm help is really, really important. I think also it was Alice or Bev, one of you that talked about the language of poverty. And so the limited words in folks' word bank. So when you talk about like being able to identify what a person's needs are, and being able to express that appropriately for some people, is a barrier. And I think that there is a language to those that are disenfranchised. And they often have those limited words and cannot appropriately ask for their needs. And that's why proper assessment and that pamphlet response just doesn't get them routed to the appropriate services. And that's why individualized care is something that across agencies, whether mainstream or not mainstream, is really important. That intimacy and that process of advocacy is really important. And thinking about our state statistics around our academic achievement gap, that's where it starts, right? And so the likelihood that folks will, generations of people will end up in similar situations is high when we are undereducating folks from different racial groups and under-resourcing their schools, but increasing the likelihood that there will be higher amounts of criminality and police interaction in their neighborhoods. And the school to prison pipeline is complicit in that as well. And so there are a lot of, I always talk about, that equity and diversity and inclusion is all tied up in justice work. And it's really important that we always recognize that folks that present to us, they come with multiple different layers. There's no one single story. There's no one single one-dimensional human being. And so folks that are receiving services, we must see them as very complex individuals. We must be able to see someone that has even previously harmed, not just those that have been wrongfully accused of harm when they have called for help, but those that have previously harmed. Also, and that as survivors, knowing that most of the folks that harm have been harmed at some point in their life. So we must do that historical trauma work that you have talked about. And a lot of my teachings and learning have come from some of those processes, some of the training that Beverly and Alice and your agency offers. And so discovery dating and healthy relationships is a really great curriculum that we have adapted for our young people and their healthy relationships work, as well as the historical trauma trainings that you all have in Mending Broken Hearts. And so I think that we must be open with we must be diverse in our efforts to educate folks and to do prevention work, and diverse and inclusive, right? And so making sure that those things are accessible to as many folks as possible. And I think really it is on us as service providers to do the work that's necessary across our agencies to streamline processes for survivors.
Thank you. I think ultimately what we're talking about when we talk about domestic violence too is all forms of abuse, because it's not just that physical violence. It's a lot of sexual violence. It can lead to some human trafficking. So we have some other components that are maybe at play when we're talking about domestic violence, just in general. And I think most of all is we don't know someone's situation, so we can be very well intentioned and trying to help, but they know their situation, they know their offender best. So we can provide some information, but it's ultimately going to be up to them when they decide to make any moves, if at all. So just having that understanding and patience with them, I think that's the biggest thing. Seeing them come back multiple times, it's not like, oh man, you again. It's, okay, what can we maybe do a little bit different this time so we can keep you safer for longer, or just adapt that safety in any way possible. So just kind of learning from that and best learning from them. Something that we did not talk about is other barriers. I think we might have mentioned children already. So having children in home, either with or not the offender's children, but just children at home in general, maybe threats that offender has talked about, withholding children, or maybe abusing the children in front of them, making them watch, so there can be different components there as well. And then pets, abusing pets or not wanting to leave pets at home. There's a a program in Brown County called Community Pause, PAWS. So that's a great program that if someone is interested in leaving, but the shelter or place that they're going to does not allow animals, they can foster for a time. So getting them still to safety and again, just understanding their situation and being able to provide some options for them. And not everyone wants to even do that of, leave their pet behind because that is a comfort for them, having their animal with them. So, just knowing that as well. So many things that you guys talked about that as we were going, I was like, man, yeah, we got to talk about that. We got to come back to that. And there's so many things with domestic violence, abuse in general that it's evolving. The abuse, so knowing the power and control wheel, some signs to look for. But in addition to that, knowing the cycle of violence, it's not always bad all the time, right? So that might be some of the reasons why certain people choose to stay is because there are some really good times. Maybe they're a great provider to the children, or there are obviously some good qualities. They're not walking into a relationship going, oh, you're going to hurt me. My children are going to be, affected for their lifetime. This sounds great. Let's do that. Right. So there's something with that offender that over time they're going to manipulate, control, and gain that power over that person. Or if it's not directly that person, it's someone in their life. Right. So having multiple players, multiple strings that are being pulled. And then ultimately, I think the biggest thing that I didn't see, it was very rare, is having a lot of family support, friends that support them. Because after some time, friends and family get worn out of like, I told you to leave. I'm not helping you anymore. Right. We need someone to always be there that they can rely on. And not every family has that. I feel like I could go on and on just talking about that, but I want to make sure we get to some other stuff too.
Just from our perspective too, that Native American community has a lot of distrust of any kind of social service institution, right? 87% of our kids were stolen and taken into residential schools and abused physically, sexually. Many didn't make it home. And so that's fresh in our memory. And then in the 50s, the second wave of theft of our kids through the foster care programs, so many of our children were taken from our homes and abused. Some were in okay homes, but they were out of community. They didn't have that web of support. And then there was that interruption of our parenting style from being away from our community and our families. So there's a big distrust of institutions and even our own. We have people who come to our Many Broken Hearts workshop, and it's kind of a pathway where we can build trust with them and say, this is great. You've done some healing, right? And here's some other resources to help you continue that journey. But they couldn't trust anyone before that. And so being an agency of people that look like them, it made it easier for them to walk through the door and take a risk and open up to possibilities of other pathways to their healing. And the other is that knowing the legal system is disproportionate in how it treats people who come before them. And so people who are harmed, it's times by people they care about, love and care about, but they want the abuse to stop. But to report them to the legal system is setting them up to, a disproportionate abuse and further harm, and really not necessarily that they come back home or to our community in any way healed, right? In the prison experience makes you more barriered up. So that's a block for people to, enter into. How do we interrupt this program? So there needs to be a lot more resources to address the people who are causing the harm, because nobody was born that way. And so how do we truly interrupt that cycle of abuse by addressing their root needs, so they can be healthy, in their own life and in relationship with all of us. The next question is, what is one thing you wish the average citizen know about domestic violence victimization?
I can start. So a couple things that come to mind for me is there's this infographic that I always go back to often, that came from our state coalition against domestic violence. Some really great people that do this work put it together. But it basically walks you through like a gender violence tree. And the roots of that tree represent the what's it called? The root causes of oppression. And the leaves of that tree represent the consequences of oppression. And then the drops that are coming from the sky, I believe, I'm trying to think about it right offhand too. So the consequences and the contributing factors is what that represents. And looking at that infographic, and I can see the visual like in my head, but the root causes of oppression is what I wish that the average person understood. And the root causes of oppression are it's oftentimes confused with the consequences of oppression, right? And so the consequences are typically like mental health issues, like drug and alcohol abuse, suicide, suicidal ideation and thought. Those are typically the consequences of being abused. But the root causes of like gender violence and oppression are things like heteronormativity, things like gender socialization, things like colonization that Bev just talked about, imperialism and patriarchy, capitalism. Those are the root causes of oppression. And so I think that by educating ourselves around that, it allows us to humanize very quickly those that come to us and need support, and those that we're put in charge of supporting and standing alongside in their journeys. I think that we can see the multiple consequences of gender violence as things that folks have to work through within that healing process, and not things that will formulate barriers for us seeing them fully and hearing them fully and believing them fully, and then being able to offer them services. Something else that I want to just put that energy into the space that I think is important is the anti-Blackness. It's global. And what I mean by anti-Blackness is global. It doesn't matter what community you're from. The darker your skin and the more African sort of phenotype that you have, the more curlier your hair, the more likely you are within even your own community to experience microaggressions and oppression on the daily. And so I like to introduce that because racism and anti-Blackness is a huge barrier for those that are most marginalized, those that are in the Black community, to receiving appropriate services, to having just general love and support within community. And we talk about that very seriously, knowing that majority of our staff are African American. And as we think about even the darkest person within the group, each day, the likelihood that they have experienced microaggressions by just people that won't touch their hands when giving them their money at the gas station, giving them their change back at the gas station, or dirty looks from another car. Those are things that the body experiences during the day, body experiences on their way to work, that they're oftentimes unseen, they're forgotten, they're not talked about, but they contribute to the pain and the isolation and the harm that folks experience and folks carry. And so as I think about every community, I think about those folks that, like I said, are the darkest, that have the most Afrocentric hair and looks, and those that, have the most African phenotype, the more likely that they are to experience violence, and to experience microaggressions and oppressive systems in all forms on a daily. And so I think that that's also important.
So as far as like the average citizen knowing things about domestic violence, is that it can happen to literally anyone. It honestly, I've worked with people who make hundreds of $1,000s a year and people that don't have a penny in their pocket, different varying degrees of education. It really truthfully can happen to anyone. Anyone can be abused and anyone can be a perpetrator. So if people had the basic understanding of the different dynamics of abuse, as we talked about, levels of emotional abuse, how much that can filter in financial abuse, like there's so many different facets to it, and also understanding the dynamics of the cycle of abuse and why people end up staying in that circumstance. With having that general knowledge, that's with hopes of reducing victim blaming. There's still quite a bit of victim blaming that goes on. One of the first things people ask is, why didn't they leave? And there's, we've talked a lot about the barriers that people face. So reducing the victim blaming and instead emphasizing that all forms of abusive behavior are unacceptable.
Yeah, I want to just jump off of that point that Jen talked about, is that, anyone can be a victim of domestic violence. And I think how this is really highlighted and made maybe a little more personal to us that have been in the work for a little bit is this will be the 10-year anniversary of Trish, her murder. Trish was a director of Rainbow House in Marinette. So she was in this work. She knew the signs. She knew all the things that we're telling you about, and yet she was a victim of this crime as well. So this year, unfortunately, we're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of that already. So I don't know what better story highlights that point than to just stress that, is that truly anyone can be. So, if we can be just open to that understanding, have some compassion for that, whatever line of work you're in, obviously you care about this topic because you're here, but we can go on and teach others who maybe are not here, just the smallest little thing of that, and just carrying that on. Right. So getting rid of some of these myths that are so huge to overcome, and all year long, but especially during awareness months, we see them highlighted maybe even more, that people forwarding something on through social media that we know working in this field, like, no, that's not true. We're trying to get over that instead of like, oh, I just saw it has now thousands of shares. No, we want to get past that, right? And all of you here are potential jurors in types of cases like this too. So understanding too that you have to have some understanding of reality versus the myth, because you could be a juror on any one of these cases. If they do actually choose to go through the system, report, and then stick with the criminal court process long enough for it to get to a jury. Because as we know, that system is challenging in itself too for victims of crime.
I think as well, it's important to mention that all of us in this room can, also be either a victim or a survivor of domestic violence. One of the things that I learned about at Golden House's event the other day was a new law or statute that was put into place to help folks that are in the work, but also are in, emergency services and health services, where you all can go to different counties to be able to receive domestic violence or sexual assault services. And I think that that's important to mention because oftentimes when you are in this work and, the small community that we're in, it may be difficult for some of us to seek services when we get into those situations. And so there's wonderful people that have been working on like statute changes that allows folks that are in those situations to receive services. And I think that that's something that I also want you all to know.
One more thing about you as being a potential jury member is that understanding the impact of trauma and how it kind of scrambles our memory of the event, or how we tell the story is out of order or out of context or is jumbled, and it can make the presenter of the information look not credible. So as a potential juror, for you to understand the impact of trauma on a victim as they're telling their story at different intersections of the journey.
Bev, I keep thinking of this and then I forget to say it every time, is to the offender, maybe having the victim arrested. So coming up with a story that the victim was actually the aggressor, right? Or, you know, making a mark on themselves, because that's something that law enforcement looks at is, you know, does anyone have any like physical marks on them showing that abuse occurred? So we've seen that too. So offenders intentionally calling law enforcement to get their victim arrested to discredit them later. You know, during times of COVID too, where appearing in court was online, restricting their access so they weren't able to get online, then they potentially have a warrant that's out for them. It goes back to all that power and control that we talked about. So creating those vulnerabilities, taking away internet access is a way to continually slam them with that power. Thanks.
I was gonna say, I think one other important thing that I want to get into the room today as well is that the understanding around men as survivors and victims as well is something that is increasing. But with that comes a lot of folks like lack of knowledge and all the historical things that are at play with men that have not traditionally reported. We received underrepresented grant that allowed us to have Black male advocates on site, where that was, I think we're in year 3 of that service, and the number of males that just from their visibility, whether it be on social media or at the agency, has really increased. And so maybe a person has come in to seek services and they're with a family member, and then they have ended up talking to and disclosing levels of violence. But the number of men that we have on site that are receiving individualized therapy or support groups. So like tonight, our average numbers is typically 22 to 25 that report for support group every Thursday. And that is just male only that are on site every week. And so the support that is needed for men and their healing is definitely also comprehensive. But it's something that a lot of them in community have said and disclosed that they have never felt comfortable coming forward. The amount of men that have been harmed by female perpetrators as young children is really a lot higher than I would have ever predicted coming into this work, and higher than I had ever seen before having those men on staff. And so word of mouth is something that's really huge in the African American community. And just to see the amount of males that are accessing services at our agency, because we've been explicit in naming men as part of that circle that we are looking to not just disclose, but to receive services. 90% of all of our services are all around that education and that healing component as well. Emergency services are just really a small facet of like what services we provide. And so it's been a blessing to be in healing and restorative circles with men, but then to also be a part of, the future of men receiving the healing services that they need, so that they can continue to move forward and heal and bring forth their families as well.
Well, on that note, it's like even our emergency shelter, a lot of people And I think it's been roughly 12 years now that policy changes incorporated where men stay at our facility as well, recognizing that that is a need in our area. Our average over the last 5 years has been roughly 14% of the residents that we have in our facility of being men. We recognize too that, it may be 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men, but that's just the reporting number. Okay. And when you're looking at the different facets of it, it might not necessarily be something that there's physical or sexual levels of abuse taking place. It might be somebody that's going and draining a bank account.
Absolutely.
It might be somebody that's telling this person that they aren't anything but dirt on the floor every day. And when you hear that repeatedly, what that does to you, eventually depression, anxiety, you have that carry on for long enough, it'll create overall huge health effects. But just like you stated, it's been expressed that men don't feel comfortable. And like even when men have stayed in our shelter, they've had those conversations about how they don't necessarily seek out the services even within the shelter because they're afraid of making someone else uncomfortable too. Okay, they're very aware of what their presence could do to trigger someone else too. But it does open those conversations. Thankfully, our new facility has a lot of trauma-informed planning that has gone into it that allows people to either be in community spaces a little more or stay within their own room. But definitely a place that both men and women can stay. But it opens those conversations about how everybody has the right to those services and that anybody can be a victim.
It was really shocking to me, y'all, like the number of men that came in to receive like individualized sessions with an advocate. And so while we have those like clinical mental health intervention services, oftentimes because they're so new, they want to be with someone that's feels a little bit less clinical for them and a little bit more community. And so we actually end up having to move our sexual assault offices over to the mental health building where there was not as much movement around because we find that the sexual assault advocates themselves are oftentimes in longer session and more consistent private sessions with those that they see as well. Our sexual assault advocates average over 200 clients on their caseloads. And roughly half of those are men right now. And those that are men that are having personalized sessions to work through the traumas of their sexual abuse. We've had an uptake since the pandemic of the amount of men that have presented with their children to our program to receive services, whether those are emergency services or healing services as well. And so I think that there's a lot of new information that we're learning about what does that cycle of violence look like for men. And so in this one circumstance with the entire family and male, we had one that, the partner was cutting off the breathing machine. And having power and control in that way, and they were disabled. And then we had one that partner, there was racism at play within the relationship. And they were calling them like very racist names when as a way of power and control, and resulted in throwing a cup of coffee in their face that scolded them significantly. And so there's a lot of things that we're learning now in this work too, about how that looks for males as survivors. And then thinking about the secondary trauma that then the children are then experiencing as well. So thank you.
What are regular needs of your agency?
So I would say the door window alarms, we have a lot of clients that request those. So just for safety. So if you have any interest in getting those, you can reach out to us. We can tell you what kind we get. I think we get them off of Amazon, which Amazon has everything now. Gas cards, bus passes, and we definitely wouldn't say no to money. So, because those kind of things allow us to be able to get hygiene supplies, art supplies, other things that we're constantly filling our agency with. So just being able to get that, if someone is going to court, we can maybe help them with court appropriate clothing if they don't have any. So the needs really just depend on every single person. So, having some gift cards somewhere that we can allow them to go and pick out something that no one is telling them that they can or can't have something. So just that freedom to be able to pick is really empowering.
For us, it's all of the same things that Shelby mentioned. We do food donations, hygiene items, new clothing. We work with St. Vincent de Paul, so we can do a verification letter. If there's items that we don't have, our clients can go there. So if you're looking to donate any used items, that is where we refer people. Otherwise, in the area, Howe Community Resource Center does a lot for that general area as well. You're welcome to reach out to other area shelters to see if they take used items, but I think a lot of them have the same circumstances as us with limited storage space as to how much they can keep in an actual closet for individuals. But gas cards, groceries, cash, like you say, we do update a current list of all of our needs on our website. And if you don't have internet access, you're more than welcome to call at any time. Our needs are going to be changing often in the next few months, just with us doing our big move. We're figuring out a lot of things that we're going to need, and hopefully, gratefully so, that the greater Green Bay area is phenomenal in looking out and helping with those things. It goes a very long way. So.
Yes, I'll third that. I get support from Family Services. I get support from Golden House, Wise Women, and a lot of the day-to-day resources that we need. So I do have a great list of people that I can call when we have like really emergent needs. As well, we live in a really resourceful community. And so our wish list is always up. And so a lot of community members, they think about us when they're grocery shopping, or they're doing their day-to-day shopping, and they'll buy something off our Amazon wish list, or they'll pick up toiletries for our clients, and they help us to stay stocked. We tried to make some connections with hotels that have things so that we can make like emergency packs. Our state coalition folks are very helpful with the like safety kits and COVID kits and condom kits, all those things that we distribute very frequently at our agency. So for us being still newer, but also older, getting there, unrestricted dollars, donations, monthly donors, anywhere from 5 to 10 to 20, like to be able to have donors that we can depend on as we continue to build our agency is really important for us. We don't have a lot of unrestricted dollars that we're able to use. And so really being grant dependent is something that it is what it is, right? We're still able to get the services to folks that we need in the best ways that we can right now. But as a culturally specific agency, to have donors of, any pay scale would be a significant benefit to us. And so on our website, sign up, donate what you can, or let others know. And then we talked about word of mouth with our clientele, the same with you all. So tell others about the work that we're doing. I think there's nothing like a vibe check. So coming to our agency, seeing how many people that we average in and out of our doors, feeling the energy, the healing energy.
You're gonna leave with a smile, I promise.
Thank
Some
you.
great people work over at
Yes.
your organization.
We're very open door and very welcoming to those that are in community that come to help us or come to see and find out what we're doing. And so we have a really resourceful circle and that I can depend on, but also any new folks that can help would be appreciated.
As another culturally specific agency, even though we've been around 25 years, we don't have that connection to generational wealth. So we've been really good at writing grants, state, federal, other grants. And now we're starting to get some national foundations, but we don't have the connection. We don't have a rich auntie or uncle who knows the CEO of something other, So our unrestricted funds is very low. So we need some help in fundraising and how to make those connections for people to even know we are here in the neighborhood and providing good services. So that would be great if anyone has land. We've been trying for 3 years to build a 50-unit permanent supportive housing unit in our town that we really need. It's a gap. There's no building for chronically homeless to have the supportive services on site. It's a huge need for our area, and we submitted an application, but happened to be the same year that they had done an education campaign apply for permanent supportive housing. And they did, and ours didn't get picked. But when we asked about our scores, all of our scores were at the top, except that we weren't in a economic HUD growth zone or something in Green Bay. And those regions are like Bellevue, Ledgeview, where there's not a bus, and they'd be like, we're providing supportive services, but as a part of that is connecting them to the web of services and community. And if they can't get there by bus. So there's some things that don't make sense. But we're looking again. We lost the land we had set aside, which was perfect land. But so that would be good. Oh, and electric blankets. We launched a safe parking program for people who are homeless living in their cars. We have 35 to 39 cars a night at our lot. And as the weather's getting colder, electric blankets will be really needed. We provide electricity on site. We have Jackery batteries for cars on the other side of the lot that they can plug their CPAP or their devices and electric blankets in. And then we take them overnight, charge them, and have them available the next morning. And then we have advocates who work with them to connect to the housing resources for other options. And there's some people, it's almost a life way. We have some that have kind of been there since we began. Just it gives them more independence in the world in being able to, this is our space, right? And they don't want to leave their partner, they don't want to leave their pet. So there's a lot of different reasons that people are choosing to live in their cars. But those are, I can't read my last scribble here. I think those are our main needs. So what can the average community member do to have an impact on domestic violence?
Well, I know we're really short on time, so I'll leave it with just a couple words. Be an active bystander. Know what signs you're looking for, how to safely intervene. And then best of all, just trust that person that they know their situation.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Find the safest ways to be a pro-social bystander with your own safety in mind first. But recognize in certain circumstances, if you're not willing to necessarily step in and get directly involved, pay attention to what's happening. Oftentimes, like if police aren't going to be involved, if you're paying attention to certain details that you can then report later, that can be helpful because there might be individuals that aren't willing to report. So by being that bystander and having that information, you can be very crucial in that role, or simply just starting a conversation. If you see somebody that's a little off, just spark up that conversation and be like, hey, you doing okay? It's not always the most comfortable conversations, but if we can normalize having those conversations, we can put people in touch with more resources.
Intentionality. So be intentional. Many of us at least, have like social media and, are on and active on different platforms. Many of our young people, they go there for their news. And many of the folks that are, in the realm of social media oftentimes get all their news from there as well. And so like our pages, a lot of us share often, and we'll keep you up to date with the statistics, the homicide rates, intimate partner violence, and we share strategies and infographics that are very youth sensitive and adult and male sensitive, all those numbers. And so be active in sharing those things. That lets others know that you are you're a safe person and that you are aware. And so it also helps to connect those that are on your social medias to our supportive services that are local, and services that are diverse in what we provide. And so think about social media as a benefit, and also, yes, a benefit in a way to open up the door to others disclosing. And so you do have power, and with that power, I understand is a great deal of responsibility. So oftentimes I like to just share things to people so that they can get the help that they need when they need it.
And just in our everyday life, to interrupt the norms of sexism and patriarchy that we are kind of living in the sea of. And so when you can not laugh at a joke that catches you off guard, and, you know, contribute to the boys' room locker, that this is okay, or where they're testing the room, that this kind of behavior or joking is okay, to have the courage to say, what, can you explain that to me? You know, tell me more about that. And that's usually enough to kind of disarm them of like, you know, when you have to explain it, then it's a little more uncomfortable when you take the curtains off, you know, what they're really trying to do with their humor. So, yeah, there's a lot of ways. So I think we're at time, you guys. We appreciate you all for being here and really encourage you to connect with all of us. You know, you know, we really appreciate you and that connection with the people that you in your family and who you work with. Thank you.
I don't think so.